Well, thank you for having me. I'm Jim Echter. I come from Rochester, New York. Had a beautiful drive here yesterday, and I'm here to talk and demonstrate the sensational Skew. So I only have one guarantee on this presentation, and when you go back to your shops, and that's this. I'm going to teach you how to very quickly and effectively make screw threads. These are 8.5-foot porch columns that I did for at a historic house in Canandaigua, New York. I had access to an 8-foot lathe. We extended it to make it 9.5 feet. I turned 2 of them on that, and then I broke the spindle because this was Doug fir and it was very heavy and it was just too much for the lathe. So then I sectioned it into thirds and turned them on my Powermatic. And ball caps, I have an article that I wrote several years ago for the Journal on how to turn these ball caps. How about things like, these are lamp parts. These were duplicates of Pennsylvania House, or have anybody making Windsor chairs here? How about pepper mills? How about ornaments? Who wants to turn pens? How about other types of kits? Who's afraid of the big bad Skew? My wife and I run a company called True Creations. My last name means true or genuine in German, so we came up with the name True Creations. I do production architectural turning, and I make a whole series of tools for fiber people. And then I do teaching and demonstrating, and I write. I've got several articles I've published in the Journal. In the April issue, I had an article called The Sensational Skew. We've rewritten it and reformatted it for the latest issue of Fundamentals. It just came out from the AAWs. I don't know if anybody looks at the fundamentals. There's an article in there that really kind of talks about what I'm going to show you today. And then we have a long-arm quilting business. This is my wife's sewing machine. It's 14 feet long, fully computerized CNC machine. So she wins. She has the largest sewing machine in the city of Rochester. The Skew. Everything you need to know, you learned in kindergarten. The Skew is actually a very easy tool once you understand how it works and you break it down. So in the kindergarten, we learned our ABCDs, our alphabet. We learned how to count. We learned how to play nice, and we learned good manners. And I'll go into all these in detail. Skew profiles. There's rectangular, there's oval, there's round, there's a new one that just hit the market, German style. It has a triangular blade on it. It's very nice. It's very light. It's easy to manipulate. I'll go into more detail during the demo on all these different profiles. Most of you want to do things like salt and pepper mills, pens, kits, balusters. So I prefer a 3/4 inch and a 1/2 inch Skew. Anything bigger than that is tough to get your hand around, your finger around. A round bottom and a flat top is preferred. So what I'm talking about, this is your Skew on drugs. It's a big Skew. I like a flat bottom here and a rounded bottom here. Some manufacturers come out flat and flat, some come out round and round. It's a personal preference. My preference, and I'll go into detail as to why I like this in a little bit. Round, 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch diameter. You get anything bigger than 3/8, and the bevel gets really long, and it's kind of hard to use. And square, also known as a beading parting tool, is basically like a square parting tool, and I'll show you some of those later on. And then oval, some people like them. I personally don't. I find them very difficult to sharpen unless you have a jig, something like this. It's the only way you can hold it to reliably get a nice bevel on it. Rounded edges and all that stuff. If you're going to teach yourself how to, my goal today for you is to have you be able to go back to your shops and teach yourself how to use this tool. So let's go with the tried and true. These profiles have been used for hundreds of years through the apprenticeship programs in Europe. You want a 70-degree skew angle, You want a bevel angle between 25 and 30 degrees. All this stuff is in the article, and you can download the article from my website. For definition purposes, so what I'm talking about, 70 degrees here, 25 to 30 degrees here. I use 30 degrees for hardwoods, 25 degrees for softwoods. While you are learning, use a 30 degree. And your bolt turners tend to make this way too blunt. It's a much sharper angle than what you're normally used to. For definition purposes, this is the bevel. This is a long point, also called the toe. This is a short point, also called the heel. Now, to achieve this angle, you take your thickness and go 1.5 times the thickness. So if this is a 1/4 inch thick, I want a bevel that's about 3/8 of an inch, 5/16 to 3/8 of an inch long. And then you'll achieve a nice working angle on your skew. After you've mastered the tool in this profile, if you want to play around with the radius edges and things like that, like Alan Laser talks about, be my guest. But you know what? This is tried, it's true, it works. Start with the fundamentals. 70 degrees, 30 degrees, round this edge over, flat here, break the sharp edges here. So sharpening profiles. If you're using an 8-inch grinder, you're going to get a hollow grind. And the advantage of a hollow grind, the only advantage of it is that it's easy and fast to hone. You want to hone your skews. You want these things to be razor sharp. A flat grind, and you'll see me use this throughout the day, is harder to hand hone. Here, you know, I'm just honing those two little points. Here, I got to hone that whole metal, you know, that whole bevel. Well, you know, I can power strop it on this. A convex grind is very difficult to control, and you want to use a straight edge while you're learning. The other very important point is that this and this must be absolute points. And what the problem that beginners have is that this tends to have a little radius on it, and that's what gives you the kickback. All right? So you want this to be absolute point. To achieve that, you hone this, you hone this, you hone this, and you hone this. There's 4 edges that you have to hone. Honing. Now, I knew I was forgetting something. This is, if you're using high-speed steel or carbon steel, and this is a wonderful method to hone a skew. You get a Tupperware container, a little shoebox, you put an inch piece of foam in the bottom, and you take a 50-50 mixture of kerosene and whatever car oil you have out in the garage, you know, 10W30 or whatever, and you put a little bit in the bottom. And you can take your oil stone, and when you press down into the foam, it lubricates it and cleans it. And then you just use a bench hook, and now you've got something that you can hone very, very quickly on. And if you don't have that, and you have a diamond, you can use a diamond plate. But this is a wonderful way to hone your tools. It's very quick. So, back to the basics. Who's heard of ABC? Okay? Anchor, bevel, cut. Well, guess what? For your entertainment today, we're going to learn how to dance. That's the D. It's the dance of the wood turner. You cannot turn unless you move your body. So we'll get into detail about that. So it's anchor, bevel, cut, and then D. We're going to talk about the dance of the wood turner and how you control the tool with your dance. We're going to talk about numbers. Can everybody here remember from kindergarten how to count to 4? There's only 3 shapes. There's straight, there's convex, and there's concave. And spindle turning, that's all there is. This was done with a skew. It's just a very shallow cove. And then, of course, the 4 surfaces that need to be honed. And then there's only 3 types of cuts. There's slicing with the edge. So we're going to slice here. There's peeling, like a pencil sharpener. And then there's a point only. So that the only thing contacting the wood is the point. And this is where beginners get into trouble. Play nice. We've all heard the term for bowl turning, rub the bevel. Spindle turning, glide the bevel. The challenge beginners have is they want to put pressure into the wood, and that's 90 degrees from where the pressure needs to be. Pressure needs to be into the tool rest, into the ground. And the bevel just glides on the surface of the wood. Beginners tend to press into the wood, and what I'm suggesting is that you press into the tool rest, and then the bevel just glides on the wood. Okay? We learned the importance of a good handshake, and I'll go into how we use the handshake in spindle turning in a little bit. Today, what I want to cover is how to sharpen and hone. I'm going to review the cuts, planing, cutting V's and pommels, peeling, shearing, bead cutting with a point, and then I'm going to take you through a series of practice exercises so you can go home and teach yourself how to use this tool. Planing cuts. So I'm going back and forth and I'm planing the surface. That is a slicing cut, not on the point, and it's not above the halfway point. If you go above the halfway point, that happens. Anybody ever have that happen? If I'm turning with the short point down, I'm cutting in this area here. If I'm turning with the long point down, I'm cutting in this, slicing with this in this area here. Slicing cut, or paring cut, and that's where I'm going to do a V, which would be the start of a bead, or a pommel. I have a peeling cut, which is a very efficient way to remove material quickly. It doesn't give you a nice surface, but it's very efficient. And then there's bead rolling, and that's basically your 4 cuts. Get yourself some 2x4s and cut them up into 2-inch by 2-inch, or 1.5 by 1.5 blanks, about 10 to 12 inches long. And let me turn one piece to show you where I'm going to go with this, and then I'll take you through the steps. So I can take and very rapidly just put a square on the end. It's easy to find the center in that, all right? So I talked about making tools for fiber. Every culture in the world has put twisted fiber in order to make cloth. So clothing, sails, whatever. And spinners have developed their own set of tools. So here in the United States, we tend to use top world, this is a whirl, top world drop spindles. This is what they used before spinning wheels were invented. And so they take the raw fleece and put it on here, and they put twist in it. You know, it pulls apart, it's weak. As soon as you put twist in it, it becomes very strong. If you've ever tried to break a piece of yarn, you know how tough it is. So they typically will turn singles, and then they ply 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6 singles together to actually make the yarn. And that's what gives it, think of it like a rope. Okay? It's no different than a rope. It's just made out of fiber. This is used in North America. This is a Tibetan spindle, and it's a support spindle. So they're using animal fiber that's very short-napped or cotton. And so they typically spun in a ball, and they spin their fiber off the tip. This is a Russian-style spindle, very popular in Russia. Same thing. And then this is an Orenburg spindle, which is a very small region within Russia that is famous for their Orenburg lace shawls. And these shawls will sell for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 because of the labor that's involved with these things. They talk about spinning the fiber. They call it gossamer lace. It's like looking at like a spider web. It's so fine. So they'll typically buy 2 to 6 10-inch long Orenburg spindles, and these are production. There's no finish on it. They're just a tool, and they fill this up with fiber. And when they get 2 to 3 or 4 or 6 of these, they then ply it together on a 13-inch version. This is a Scottish spindle. This is what they use in Scotland. This is a Turkish spindle. and they spin the fiber, and when they're done, and they wrap the fiber around here and they make a ball, and when they're done, they pull this out, they pull this out, they pull that out, and they have a ball of fiber already made. And then there's all sorts of other tools with unusual names. This is what they call a nastapin. It's a Norwegian ball winder. So knitters like to work on balls of yarn, and so they'll take this and they wind their yarn on here, and they end up with a center pole ball. And then sewers and quilters, this is a pocket turner, and if you think about sewing, you're going to sew a pocket onto a piece of fabric. They do it inside out, sew it together, and then they flip it, and it's a poking tool, basically to poke the corners out when you turn the garment around. And there's different shaped balls and ends on the end. So these are things that these are Christmas ornaments. I make collectible ornaments every year. These are shawl pins. So I'll be turning whorls. I'll cut out a little circle out of it and make shawl pins and whatnot. So these are some of the tools that I make in a production mode. I wholesale these around the country to fiber vendors. Spinning wheel, which is what we call a kick spindle. It's like a great big upside down top, all folds into itself. You set it on the floor, you kick it, and you can draft your fiber off of that. And I sell those all over the world. When you're roughing wood, you never work off the end. You always cut, and you never work in the middle because you could peel off a big fiber. So you're going to start at the end and work towards the middle. A, B, C, anchor. Handles low. I'm going to ride the bevel, lift the handle. When it starts to cut, I go. Now, notice my body position. Okay? My handle is this way with this gouge. Spindle roughing gouge. This is Doug Thompson's 5/8 inch spindle roughing gouge. Similar position. Now, for years, I did not own a roughing gouge. I used a bowl gouge. Cutting angle, 45 degrees. Anchor, ride the bevel, lift the handle. My point is, see where the handle is? So I've gone from here to here. See where my handles are? Two different positions. My concentration is on the cutting edge. So one of the key points that I want you to go away with today is to concentrate on the cutting edge and the position of the cutting edge, and let the handle go where the handle has to go. Achieve the same cut, two different tools, two different tool angles, or handle angles. The practice exercise that you'll eventually get to is we're going to make it round. My tool line of gliding is around here. Not down here, not up here, around 11 o'clock. Does that planing, you never come off the end. A, B, watch my body movement. The other point that you need to go away with is, I'm cutting at a 45-degree angle. Once I start the cut, I'm going to finish the cut in that exact same position. These are finesse moves. All in the legs. Something different for everybody? Didn't know about that? This is the dance. A, anchor, B, ride the bevel, C, cut, and D, dance. 12 o'clock, I want the tool to be cutting at 11 o'clock. I need to raise my tool rest to achieve that 11 o'clock position. So for your beginners, you want your spindle height at elbow or an inch or so higher. That allows you to stand up straight. If you're bending over like that, you'll last about 10 minutes and your lower back will give out. So I've got riser blocks on all my lathes. It could be a 4x4, or you could turn riser blocks, whatever. You got to get the lathe up high so that you're standing upright. You don't want to be standing on concrete. You've got pads. Changing my position so I'm standing upright. So all I basically have done is rotate the tool rest and my gliding point to accommodate my height. First thing you're going to do is planing cut, peeling cut. Start out using only part of your tool. Don't use the whole width of the tool. And it's not a scrape. I'm not jamming it in like a negative rake scraper. I'm going to peel it. So you can size a tenon very rapidly. Then I've got first cut was planing. That's a slicing cut. Second cut was a peeling cut. Third one is a paring cut, and that is the only thing that touches that wood is the point of that tool. I've swung the handle to give me about a 1 degree clearance. I've rotated the handle to give me a 1 degree clearance. So that the only thing touching is that point. Short point, I'm not jamming the point in, I'm slicing. So I'm off the point, I'm slicing in this area. Okay? Long point, same area. All right? My concentration is on the angle of that tool cutting edge. Here I'm pushing the fibers. Here I'm peeling the fibers. 45 degrees, optimum angle for slicing. I sliced with the long point, or the short point down first. Here it is with the long point. Same thing. I'm going to ride the bevel. I'm going to lift the handle. Now, the disadvantage I find of that is that's where my handle is. So now my support is way back here versus having my support right up here, doing with the long point up. Dividers, set it at about 5/8 of an inch in diameter apart, okay? And then just take and step this off. Then take a pencil and put a little line down the middle. Now we're going to make V-cuts. So, I mean, you can do this with a ruler. It's just faster with the dividers. And the goal is eventually we're going to roll beads, and the goal is to leave that line, the pencil line, okay? So in order to do a bead, the first thing we got to do is make V's. Talk a little bit about tool rests. See the difference between those tool rests. Designed for a bowl turner, designed more for general purposes. And why I say that is with spindle turning, there's and you'll see it, where you under the tool rest grip, and that's too big. I can't get my finger underneath it. So you're better off with a thinner tool rest. Dress your tool rest. Take a fine file. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's little nicks in here. You know, there's a nick here, a nick here. Those are going to catch your edge of your tool. So if you have a cast iron tool rest, this is step one. You can't be a spindle turner until you remove the bumps and the gouges. Those of us that have belt sanders, I just take it over and go on the belt sander and I'm done. You can wax it if you want. I don't find necessary to wax it. You want to stay away from the center post because you can't put your finger there. So if you have to move the tool rest over. I'm at or below center right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut some V's. Start with the handle low, A, B, I come straight in. Now I want to cut in that angle. Now I want to cut in that angle, in that direction. Cut in that direction. Cut in that direction. Cut in that direction. Sight in the direction you want to go, and you're going to swing that point into that direction. Again, point only. If you come up and start to cut that on that bevel, then that slicing edge, ping, comes back. Watch. Straight in. Now, see that chip? That's what you're looking for. This is really cool in maple. When you're using hard maple and you do this, these things will literally spin off and come up and hit you in the forehead. That's when you know you're cutting properly. This is what we're going for. All right? So, I'm going to bring the tool in. When you were shaking hands, you were in this position, right? That's how you shook hands. When you're rolling a bead, you end in that position. So, if I'm rolling to this side, I'm going to rotate my hand this way so that when I get down, I'm in that position. If I'm rolling this way, that's where the manners come in. We've cut V's. Now we're going to work our way down. And the tool is going to start in this position and end in this position. And when it's in this position, I'm shaking hands. So if I'm going this way, I rotate my hand this way. So I end up shaking hands. If I'm coming this way, I'm going to hold the tool against the tool rest with my thumb. And I'm going to rotate that, I'm going to rotate that tool through that arc. And if I have to, I'm going to end up with the very last thing they talk about, the production turners. I'm taking this point and I'm driving it where I want it to go. So I'm going to basically try to split this angle and keep that point going. So the point's going in that way. 1, 2. See that curl? Ride that bevel all the way down to the bottom. Tuck the point and come out. See that curl? Now you want to knock down every other bead. And cutting coves is just like when you were a kid in kindergarten playing on the beach and they're in their sandbox digging sand. I bring the tool in, I bring it in straight just to give me a starting point. I'm going to come over, I'm going to rotate it, and while you're learning, the flute's in the neutral position, okay? Handle high. You enter the wood. Once you enter the wood, now I can rotate the tool to open up the flute. I'm going to start to lower the handle, and I can cut. But by starting in this position, if I go in wrong, it's just going to fall away. If I come in opened up and I jab it in here, it's going to potentially skate on me. So this is how you prevent the skate. Start in the neutral position, handle high, lower the handle. You buy a spindle or detail gouge, a lot of times they come ground like this. You take the tool against your grinding wheel turn the flute 90 degrees, and you grind a little convex arc on there. And what you end up with is a perfect fingernail profile. Now you can grind that profile to the proper shape. Now all you bowl turners like to use your Wolverine jigs and go cram in your tool in there, and yes, you will do a fingernail profile, but you'll be way too blunt. You'll be at a, you'll grind your spindle gouge into a bowl gouge profile. 25 degrees from the flute to here. 25 degrees. Spindle tools, 25 degrees, 30 to 25. Start with 30 degrees. And when you get comfortable with it, you can take it to 25 degrees on a skew. 25 degrees on a spindle gouge. Now, I'm using a detail gouge. A detail gouge is cut out of round stock and has a narrow flute. A lot of meat here versus a traditional spindle gouge, which is shaped, like that. And the reason being is I do a lot of work where I'm hanging way over the tool rest, so I want that beef. The disadvantage is you end up with to do this at a 25-degree angle, I end up with a bevel that's about an inch long. So I got to grind that away, and I just take it up the grinding wheel and just remove metal, just get it out of the way, so that my bevel is really only about 1/8 of an inch long. Anchor, bevel, lift the handle, cuts. Come to the side, neutral position, handle up, in the wood, rotate, cut. We always want to cut downhill. Grain's running this way. So if I'm cutting a cove, I'm cutting this way. I want to go down the stairs. I want the fiber supported. So we always want to cut downhill. So in spindle turning, we're cutting from big diameter to little diameter. Bowl turning, okay, which grain's running this way. I'm working on the outside of a bowl. I want to be walking downhill. I got to be cutting this way. And we're working on the inside of a bowl. I want to walk downhill. I got to be cutting this way. I'm doing a goblet. I'm doing an end grain bowl. All right. I'm going to cut the outside like spindle turning. I want to hollow it out. I want to cut this way. I'm going to drill a hole and pull. Anybody had problems with your pocket filling up with sawdust? Very expensive solution. Blue tape. And you tape your pocket shut. So I'm cutting downhill. And you continue on, and in architectural turning, you never put a cove into a bead because then it's an OG. There's always a fillet in between. So you want to have a fillet. But that's basically what we're going to work up to is that exercise. And it takes about 12 of these. And if you're doing greenwood, you can do this. You can, when you're all done, you knock the beads down, and you do it again. You can do this 2 or 3 times on a piece of wood, then you throw it out, and you get the next piece on. And it just takes time and practice. Safety drives. Before we had the invention of live centers, we had what they called cup centers, or dead centers. So this was a cup center. So it's just a ring, it had a little point, and they put a little beeswax in it, and that's what they used to use before the invention of live centers. Well, we use this as a safety center. Put it in, and we're going to drive with that because when you catch, it's going to slip. It just takes the excitement out of it. If I use a traditional cross, drive center, if I get a catch, it's going to be very exciting. Now, in lieu of this, since a lot of these don't come with these anymore and they're difficult to find, we can make a wooden safety center. And what we do basically, and I'll do one after lunch, is we'll turn a Morse 2 taper out of wood with a little ring on the front end, drill a hole in it, put an 8-penny nail in it, and now it just sticks out, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch. Now I drill an 1/8-inch hole in the end of my stock, and I've got a safety center. So I've marked my squares on the end. I'm getting close. We're going to rough this. Your traditional spindle roughing gouges have a tang on it. And if you put that into cross-grain wood, you will snap the tool right there. And having pieces of steel flying around your shop is not recommended. This is a Doug Thompson spindle roughing gouge. It's been made out of bowl, round material. I still wouldn't use it on a bowl. Okay? Just a good bad practice. Handle low, ride the bevel, lift the handle, cut. Notice my body position. I'm going to start moving the tool. Once I get it cutting, I don't change the position. Beginners tend to do this. Lock it in the position, control the tool. So we're doing a table leg, right? We got a square section at the top, and then we're going to have details at the bottom. We're doing a baluster. Got a square section, we're going to go around. So there's where my square section is. I'm going to start my V-cut to the right about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to step my V-cut in to that line. So the first thing I'm going to do is a straight pommel. You don't see this very often. You look at balusters from 120 years ago, you'll see this type of a detail. It's not very common anymore. Most pommels are shaped like this now. Okay? Handle low. And I'm just going to step in until I see that line go all the way around the wood. So, and I didn't take time to really square this up, but, all right, so let's go a little bit deeper. So I'm going to come back to the right a little bit. All right, so now I've got my square. Now we would round this section over. Now with a traditional roughing gouge, it has a square section on it, so you can do a peel cut with it. All right, so now I've got a round section against a square. All right. Now I want to do that nice curve, right? Detail. Can you see that? Ready for the magic trick? What was the motion with the V-cut? 2, lift, right? 2, I'm turning to the left, lift. 2, lift. 1, 2, 3, and one more for good measure. So I did a straight cut. Ready for the magic? And there's my curved pommel. AEW journal, or on my website. Do-it-yourself belt sharpening system. Winter 2009, things I wish I'd known as a beginner. Download these. So this is a very expensive, high-tech sharpening system. I went to Harbor Freight with my 20% off coupon. I think I paid $60. I think that's $69 today. You cannot reverse this motor. And I wanted a narrow base, so all I did was cock the motor and put a figure 8 in the fan belt. So that it now runs this way. Instead of running this way, it runs this way. I took, these are two pieces that came with it. I just kind of rearranged it. I bought a bolt for, a half-inch bolt for whatever, 45 cents or whatever. Cut it off. I did turn this little cup. I bought another bolt, and I bought this little piece of metal that I bent, and I tapped that on. I was fortunate I had an arbor, but, of course, this is, who knows, it's supposed to be metric shaft. This was a half-inch arbor. I just turned a little wooden bushing to put it on. You put some buffing wheels on, and you put some discs against it to stiffen it up. Okay? I had this blue track, and so I've got different pockets. And I have a very, very high-tech indexing system on here. It's made out of that 695 roll of blue tape. And I've got here half-inch skew, 3/4-inch skew. This is how long it takes me to sharpen my skew. Want to time it? 1, 2. I've used it a lot, so I'm going to do it again. 3, 4. I'm sharp. Whatever I can get at Home Depot, which I think is 180. So for less than $100, I have a sharpening system. I wouldn't necessarily use this to profile unless you put a coarse blue belt on that. Right? Use your grinding wheel. But to sharpen, that's all it takes. Now, let's switch over to a bowl gouge. Beading parting tool. Very expensive tool. It's the finest used screwdriver I could find at the used tool store in the town next to me. It was 50 cents, but it's a square shank. Stuck it in a handle, and I just cut, and I just grind a straight bevel on here, okay? It's called a beading parting tool. I can part with it, and you can roll little beads with this. 3-point tool, piece of high-speed steel, stuck in the grinder, made a 3-point tool. Now look at that thing. Is that perfectly ground? No, I don't care. I'm making little details. I think that piece of steel was probably $3. This was a very expensive piece of chrome metal that I found on the side of the road. I crammed it in there and put a bevel on it, and I have a nice little round skew, which is useful for, like the little ornament finials and things like that. This is a box tool. I think I got about $2.50 into this. Piece of 1/4-inch high-speed steel, a long bevel to the center point, and a skewed angle that matches my jaws on my chucks. For the box tool, took it, to the belt sander and put along. The bevel comes to here. It ends in the middle. And I put a slight skewed angle on here to match the angle of my dovetail. So I use this in the bottom of bowls when I want to cut the recess for my jaws of my chuck. And it's a box hollowing tool. The advantage of it is, so I'm hollowing the inside of a box, right? And here's the very cutting tip of that tool, right? What's that? It's relief, right there, automatic. So for a couple bucks, I got a tool that I use when I'm turning these flywheels for my spinning wheel. I got it mounted on a chuck. Zip, zip, zip. I got my dovetails. Perfect. I'm making a box. Use that. Perfect.